The studios are a technology-rich space here in the Edmund Lowe Library where students can experiment with some of the latest software and devices. We want to make sure that these tools are available to all students at OSU because we want to provide them an opportunity to develop a proficiency as well as a comfort level with the kinds of technology you need to be successful here at OSU and beyond. To that end, we are also hosting this monthly series, Tech Tuesday at 2. On the first Tuesday of the month, we meet here in the Edmund Lowe Creative Studios for interactive showcases of emerging and innovative technology. Today, we are going to be talking about Blender, a free open source 3D creation suite. Shannon Gard, our library technology specialist and manager of the Edmund Lowe Creative Studios, is going to give a demonstration of the software, followed by a discussion and Q&A. If you're watching on today's live stream, you can submit your questions as well via Twitter using the hashtag LibTech2s. Along the way, we'll be drawing for prizes, including today's grand prize, a programmable mouse. If you're an OSU student, be sure to fill out one of our prize entry forms. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon.
All right, thank you, Bonnie. You can find a seat just anywhere you see a laptop, right over there. Okay, how are y'all doing today? Thank you all for coming. Okay, so my name is Shannon Gard. I am the technology specialist here at Edmund Lowe Library in the Creative Studios, and I'm going to talk to you all about Blender. Okay, let's get to it. So, first things first, show of hands, who here has experience with 3D modeling software? Nice, nice. Do you mind if I ask what you use? SolidWorks. SolidWorks? Anybody else different? I like you already. Blender, thank you. Anybody AutoCAD, Maya, ZBrush? Maya, nice. Okay. Okay, so some of you already have a little bit of a intro, but I'm just gonna, oh, this is my little joke here. Blender, for those of you with no experience in 3D modeling, don't be afraid. In fact, that's awesome. Blender is a software suite that is a 3D modeling creation. It supports the entirety of the 3D pipeline. It's not just modeling, it is also animation, it is also rigging, it is also rendering, it is also video editing, character design, game creation. It has its own game engine, has a physics model. You can do all sorts of incredible things. So let's see. Blender is also cross-platform compatible. It'll work on a Dell, it'll work on a Mac, it'll work on Linux if you're way smarter than me. It works on everything. No matter what kind of system you're running, Blender will work on it. Now, why should you use Blender? There's a lot of 3D modeling programs out there. So there's a couple of reasons. There's a couple of really good answers to this. One, Blender is open source and completely free. It is community driven. It is based, the company, the Blender Foundation, is a nonprofit organization based out of the Netherlands whose sole purpose was to create a software program that could be accessible to everyone and free and capable of all of the things that you could do with a mainstream modeling and creation software. Let's see. Whatever you create with Blender is your sole property. They will claim no rights to anything that you create, whether it's a rendered model or an animation that you make or a game or even an advertisement. You can use it commercially, what you create, and you could sell it, and Blender will claim no rights to what you've created whatsoever. You can alter the code. It is an open source program, so you have direct access to the source code and you can make alterations and adjustments. You can even sell your altered copies of Blender. Their whole purpose is to make this type of technology available for everyone, and they've done pretty much everything conceivably possible to make an open software that everyone can use. And when I mentioned before that it's open source and free to download, I should qualify that with SolidWorks, AutoCAD, Maya, ZBrush. There is a ton of other software out there, and I'm not discounting the fact that those are excellent pieces of software. What I am saying is this. The cost of these programs, even student editions, are severely up there. There's There's a significant cost to all of these software. A lot of them with updates and upgrades, you cannot just keep updating them. You have to pay for the newest version when it comes out. Some of them are only subscription-based, bless you. Some of them are only subscription-based. Some of them only include 1 year full of updates, and then you have to purchase the new edition. It's a bit of a stop measure. It's a bit of a filtering device, because if you can't afford these software, where do you turn to if you want to do things digitally in 3D? Well, in this case, I say turn to Blender. So, who uses Blender and what for? It's exactly what you'd expect. You know, engineers, architects, people that want to do character modeling, but it's not just that. Engineers can use it to design, you know, different components, concept models. Architects can use it to design interiors. Interior designers can then populate those interiors with all sorts of 3D models. Sculptors have used it to do basic digital sculpting. I mentioned game creators. Teachers have used it to enhance their classrooms. Let's see, biologists, molecular biology, anybody? Okay, I have had people come in and want to learn to model so that they can visually view a molecule by just creating it themselves. Really cool stuff. It's not who uses Blender, it's who doesn't use Blender. Anybody really can. So I know what you're thinking. You hear the word 3D modeling and the first thing out of everyone's mouth is this. I don't know what I'm doing. I have absolutely no experience whatsoever. With those of you that do have experience, okay, fine. But for everybody else, when you say 3D modeling, it usually scares people away because it sounds like something horrifyingly complex that is way beyond their reach, that you have to go to school for, that is just impossible. Not the case with Blender. Everybody has to start somewhere, and in this case, because Blender is such a wide community of contributors, you have the entire internet at your disposal to learn how to use this software. Now, there's been plenty of books published, there's a lot of tutorials and things of that nature, but the best part is, when you go to the source to download the software, as I hope all of you will, to play around with it, blender.org, the location of the software where it's hosted, has an enormous collection of tutorials that'll walk you through the process, starting with the basics, getting used to a three-dimensional space, rotating your space, zooming in, panning, and then scaling, moving simple objects, starting from the beginning. And I can vouch for this because a year ago, I had no experience with 3D modeling whatsoever. Using blender.org, using also, I should mention, lynda.com, I have taught myself the basics of 3D modeling to the point where I use it primarily for modeling objects that I later 3D print. We'll get more into that later. But the point is, you're not alone in learning a new software. It does take a little bit of perseverance because it's always weird to learn a new software, but you have blender.org, you have lynda.com. There are tons of tutorials out there, and what's best is Blender is currently installed on every computer we have at the library, whether it's the laptops, the desktop stations, everything has Blender installed on it. And what's even better is a lot of our systems have multiple monitors, so with video tutorials, you could have the tutorial going on one, and you can have Blender open on the other, and you just follow along. It's pretty intuitive. Now, lynda.com, if you've, anybody ever heard of it before? Nice, nice. Lynda.com is partnered with LinkedIn, and they are, you know how you can sometimes go to YouTube and find a tutorial on how to do something, and it's kind of okay, but kind of eh. Lynda.com is basically the good YouTube. It's the good videos. It's the professional quality training. Lynda.com, the library has purchased several subscriptions through Lynda.com, and you can request access on the library's webpage via the Edmund Lowe Creative Studios and get access to Lynda.com and watch some really professional grade tutorials. So, let's show what this stuff can do. I'm going to start with some things that I've done because they're a little bit less impressive, and then I'll get into what others have done. Remember, I've only been at this for a year and kind of part-time on the side, so bear with me. One of the first things I started doing was manipulating basic shapes. In this case, I was working with cylinders and Bezier curves, and for some reason I always end up making crockery. I can't explain it. So this is This is kind of a look at one of the things that I first modeled. Then I started playing around with textures, applying, this is not real, this is all digital and all done in Blender. I started applying textures like glass and glossy coatings. I experimented trying to make it look ceramic. Then as time progressed, I got a little bit more advanced with it. I started making things a little bit smoother, started getting deeper into rendering, applying better textures. So yeah, I'm a big fan of dinnerware. Maybe one of these days I'll print out a new, like my own set, who knows. Another thing I did, as time went by, occasionally I've had people come up to me and say, hey, could you model this? I've got this thing and I want to totally do this thing. I had someone here in the library, we recently pitted department against department to do a fundraiser. We call it Penny Wars. You can look up how it's played, but the point is we wanted to print out trophies, custom made, and all I had to go on was this image here. A friend of mine put this together and said, do you think you could make something like that? And I said, sure. Went on to blender.org, how to create 3D from 2D. And with a little bit of practice, I essentially imported the image, traced it out, exported it, turned it into an object, punched it out, imported a couple of cylinders, played around with the text a little bit, and 3D printed these trophies off of a picture. I had never done that before, but I sure know how to do it now, and it's fun. So that's another thing I've done. Let's see. First Lady Ann Hargis came in here. I don't know if any of you have heard of the OK State Pete's Pet Posse, the dogs that come in that you can just roll around with. I love them. They wanted to print out some, well, dog tags for the dogs. So based on their design, I did the exact same thing. I just traced it out, turned it into an object, and then 3D printed that Scruff is Ms. Hargis's dog. So just bringing ideas into reality. And again, I had no experience with this before. I mean, you find something you want to do and you figure out how to do it. This one I did not do. This is an example of someone who, I believe they modeled this from the ground up. They took in this case, I think they took a picture of a BMW, turned it into a 3D object by mapping it three-dimensionally, and they started manipulating and coming up with concept car designs. This is a little hard to understand without knowing the software, but this is done by an architect and a decorator, a designer who wanted to create their own house. So they used Blender and rendered it, applied textures, and made this incredibly photorealistic setting of something that was just in their heads. And this is what I love about Blender. It's applicable to almost everyone. Whether you want to design something, whether you're an entrepreneur and you have a cool idea of something you maybe want to sell later on, all of it is possible. There are so many aspects to Blender. So I want to briefly show you this video of, and I should mention, excuse me, all of this again was created in Blender. This is a demo reel of user-submitted content over the past year of what people have done, and this is pretty incredible. This is actually hosted on blender.org's homepage, and all of this is just user-submitted. And I think I might have lost the internet. Okay. Oh man. Yep, nice. Okay, so point is, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have any prior experience. If you do have prior experience, awesome. If you're used to a different software, awesome. I encourage everyone to check out this software. So please do. Okay, so I'd like to open it up for questions about the software, and then we're gonna take a break, and then I'm gonna finish up with a brief, we'll call it a Blender crash course. I wanna show you all the basics of how you can get started using Blender. Any questions, anyone? Sure.
How easy is it to convert to an STL file for 3D printing?
Say that again?
How easy is it to convert to STL for 3D printing?
It's incredibly easy to convert from STL, from a 3D model in Blender to an STL. Whatever it is that you've modeled, let's say, for example, this is the main interface. We'll get more into this later, but if I wanted to 3D print this cube, it's a simple matter of exporting it as an STL. It doesn't get much simpler than that. And yeah, for those of you who know, .stl is the universal file format for 3D printing. It's understood by almost every 3D printer out there. Good question. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to turn it back over to Bonnie, and we're going to talk more about Blender in just a bit.
No, we're going to do the demo. We'll go out there yet.
Oh, okay. Well, the demo might take a while.
It's okay. That's okay.
Okay. So in front of you are your laptops and mice. So go ahead, if you haven't already, click on the desktop, click on Blender. And what you should see when you open it up is a splash screen that you just click anywhere off on the side and it'll close. And this is the startup cube. It's legendary. So what you're looking at here is incredibly scary upon first examination. You're looking at all these buttons, all these sliders, a million different things going on. Calm down and don't panic. The first thing you should just look at is just the center view here. This is the 3D view. And in it, you've got several components by default. You've got a lamp, which in this case is a light source. You have a camera, or a representation of a camera, and you have a cube. This space is where you will do all of your work, whether it's modeling, applying textures, whatever. So the first thing, first and foremost, is what's the difference between 2D and 3D? Come on. The axes. Very good. Nice. Don't jump ahead. This guy. You have experience, so I appreciate it. Okay. 3D, you have to get used to viewing things from all directions. So the first and best thing you can learn is middle mouse button, hold it down while your cursor is in this space, and move your mouse from side to side. This will rotate your screen and allow you to see your object from all different angles. Getting used to rotating your view around is probably the most important step, because if you're trying to model something and you're only looking at it from one side, it's not going to work out. You're going to be constantly shifting your view from one side to the other. You can go up and down. You can completely reverse upside down if you want to. And of course, side to side. Now, if you're working with multiple objects, it can also be important to know how to pan, meaning shift your focus from the center to the right or to the left. And you do that by holding down Shift and holding down the middle mouse button. And now you can see, dragging side to side, you're shifting your focus and your center of rotation from the center of this cube to another area. Everybody get that? Nice. Another thing that's incredibly important is if you're going to be working with a large space or a small space, zooming. Still on the middle mouse button. Roll the mouse wheel forward to zoom in and roll it back out to zoom out. You can zoom way, way out. I mentioned before that model of that home, that was zoomed way, way out. There is no limit to this space. You can make things as large or as small as you like. So learning mostly rotation, panning, zooming, crucial. Everybody got that? Pretty straightforward. Any questions? Anybody stuck? Anybody's mouse not working? I should point out it is really important to have at least a 3-button mouse. Without this center button, you're really going to struggle, which is also why we're excited about giving away this programmable mouse, because there are a lot of functions, as you will find out with this software. So, got the hang of rotation, so now let's start playing around with the cube. Now, if you kind of zoom in on it, pan your view over to where you're looking kind of right at it, you'll notice it's got these arrows coming out of it at all different directions. Now, if you look down here, I don't know if you can see, but down here on this lower end, these are the corresponding axes to these colors. Green being the y-axis, X being the red, and the z-axis being the blue. And as you rotate around, you'll notice that those don't change. Those will always stay corresponding to their respective angles. And this down here in the side, on this lower corner, this will stay oriented properly as well. So this is really useful when you're shifting things around. So use your left mouse button to click on this arrow. Start with any one you like. Click and hold and drag it up. This will shift whatever object you have selected upwards on just the z-axis. Likewise on the x-axis, and on the Y. And if you move something off screen, this is back where you remember your rotation, your zooming, why it's so important. Zoom out, recenter, move some more. So experiment with shifting your view and shifting that cube around on its various axes. Try moving it in a circle on this little plane here if you can. Everybody getting that? Nice. Okay. Am I going too slow? I can speed up. Okay. I saw some terrified head shakes. Okay. It's okay. Okay, so everybody get the hang of movement? All right, now we're going to do something a little bit more interesting. Left click anywhere on this here to set. What this does is set an origin point. This origin point for the 3D cursor is where objects that you import or things that you're going to play around with will be brought into reality. So over here on the left-hand side, right now this tab that's selected is called Tools. Go ahead and select Create. And this is another thing I love about Blender, is it gives you basic objects to work with. So go ahead and import a cone, and it should pop up right where you had clicked your cursor. Now if you had accidentally clicked way over here and imported it, you might have to do a little bit of moving around to get it into place. But you can import any of these different objects and start moving them around and playing with them. In fact, you should have one cone imported. If you have multiple ones, that's fine. If you want to delete something, all you have to do is hit the delete key and then click delete. Try importing a cube, a cone, a cylinder, and oh heck, I don't know, how about a monkey? And try moving all of the, I don't know why they've always had that as a default object. I think it's so people can get used to doing sculpting. There's also a sculpting component to this as well. So try manipulating all of these different objects. Now to select a different object, you right click on it. When you left click, you're just setting that origin point. Now Blender is very customizable. If this is driving you crazy, if you're used to Maya, you can actually set your preferences to switch your mouse buttons, but it's totally up to you. But for now, to select an object, you right click on it. So try playing around with these and see if by scaling things around, moving it around, see if you can stack these things on top of each other to create a very weird looking totem pole. So right click on an object, drag it on its axis, rotate around, get a better view, panning, don't forget to pan, because sometimes I'll find people working way over here trying to figure out where is it? Remember to shift your view and always be rotating your screen, because we're in 3D here, we have to see things from all sides. So I'm going to get caught up here. Anybody having trouble there? Select objects, move around, Z-axis, Y-axis. How do you import? On the left-hand side. Luis, you want to show them? Thank you. On the left-hand side, this is tabs here. Tools is selected by default. Create is selected right below it. And then you just click on any shape. Okay? Looking good? Everybody getting that? Playing around? Okay. So once you've got something that looks, well, as goofy as mine looks, you can kind of come to a stop. Okay, so that is the basics of just getting used to the space and shifting objects around. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more interesting. If you would like, really quick, go up to File and hit New and reload the startup file. This will put you right back to a default view, and it's going to destroy your totem pole, but this puts you back at the default view, and you can reload the initial startup file anytime you like. Now, back to moving things around on the axes. You see how there's an arrow on the ends of all of these? Right now, that's because the translate indicator is selected. If you look down at the bottom, you see this little arrow right next to where it says global. You've got these three different options here. Right now, translate is selected, which is the movement option. Now with the cube selected, if you hit this one here, this is the rotate transform tool, which if you then grab a hold of the object or one of those axes, you're now rotating it on that respective axis. You can zoom in, get a better look here. Now it's rotating around the Z. and you're left clicking on these to grab a hold of them. There's it rotating on the X. Very useful function there. Now, that's the rotation option. Now here's the one I use probably the most. The third option for transformation is scaling. If you select this one, you'll notice these little knobs here are now little cubes. If you grab a hold of one of these, it will now scale it on that respective axis. So when you started out with that cube, now you've got an oddly rotated rectangular prism. If you stretch it out on the Y, you got a nice big block here. You can stretch it out on the X. Whoa, zoom out. Shrink it down on the Z. I might fix that rotation. You know what, I might just start over. Rotating bugs me. I usually do it. I usually don't rotate things. Okay. You can fiddle around with these and start to see how quickly you could start making basic objects and shapes. So see if you can import a cube. You may have to reload because rotate can sometimes throw things all crazy. See if you can import that cube and turn it into a nice flat, long rectangle like this. Everybody get that? Always be rotating your view. Now if the lamp and the camera are annoying you, they're not necessary for modeling, they're only for rendering. You can right click on those and delete them so they don't distract you. So once you've got this, go back to your translate, go back to the arrow, and shift that up a little bit to where it's floating above your basic workspace, like so. Okay? So now, I'm going to left click here on this edge, and I'm going to set a new origin point, and I'm going to add another cube. Remember, go back to your left-hand sidebar here, select the Create tab, and import another cube. Okay? So now, rotating around, I'm going to scale this down to where it is skinny and small and tall. And I'm going to create a table leg. Once you've got it the shape you want it, you can do a long leg, you can do whatever you like. I'll just do a long leg for now. In fact, I'm going to make that table right there. This is how I kind of got started. At the very, very beginning, as I looked at the world around me and looked at different objects and saw how I could manipulate them and maybe improve them or make models or replicas or maybe improve them. It doesn't matter. So once you've got a leg you like, switch your transform back to translate, the arrow, and now arrange it into space. Rotate your view around, get that kind of centered, shift that down some. Looks good. I might get a little bit, shift my view there. So there we go, decent enough. Everybody there? Yes? There is an undo button. If you need to undo what you've done, do Control Z. That is a universal undo button. Okay. All right, so once you've got your leg where you like it, now we're going to go back to this Tools menu up here, and we're going to duplicate this object. We've already got it the size we want, and we want nice symmetrical things for the most part. When you select Duplicate, it will automatically snap to your cursor and move where you want it to go. Now, if you don't want to have to manually, move it around, if you hit the X key or the Y key, depending on how your table is oriented, it will move only on that axis, which can be incredibly useful when you're trying to keep things where they are oriented in space. So there, to freeze it in space, you left click, and then you can make any micro adjustments that you maybe need to. Let's move that out some. Nice. So that is a perfectly decent table. Hey, those of you who've never done this before, you're 3D modeling. Not bad? Pretty good. Good job. Okay. So, next step. What do we want to do with this? Do we want to give it more legs? Do we want to make it bigger? Do we want to add a chair? We can do anything we can imagine. Do we want to make, in my case, you want to make a bowl to sit on top of it? We can. How about this? If you want to select multiple objects, whichever you have selected here, hold down Shift and right-click on another object to select it. Then keep shift held down and right click on the other leg until you've got everything selected. Now, zoom out some. You should have all the components of this table selected. Hit duplicate again. Or if you want to use a shortcut, you can use Shift D. I'm just going to hit the button for now. Now we have 2 tables. I'm going to duplicate again. Now we have 3. Nice. You know what? I'm going to duplicate it again. I'm going to press the Z key and stack it on top of itself. Do that again. Use the Z key, stack that on top of itself. Now I've got some shelves. Once you start, it's really easy to keep going. It's really fun to do. I mean, I'm going to, you know what? I didn't like those shelves. I'm going to keep that table there, that one there. I'm going to move that over there. Oops. So again, using your rotating, using your zooming, using your panning, it's incredibly easy to get started. You just have to have the time and the patience with yourself to learn the basics, to get familiar with the space, to get used to manipulating objects and thinking in 3 dimensions. And there is no reason that anybody shouldn't be able to do this. So that's all I'm really going to go into. If any of you would like to go further, if you would like more instruction, feel free to come to me here in the Edmund Lowe Creative Studios. I'd love to give you another crash course. We can go deeper into it. If any of you would like to get access to lynda.com, jump onto the library's website and look for the Edmund Lowe Creative Studios. There is a link to request lynda.com access. You can get access to a whole world of tutorials. There's always blender.org. There are some really good ones on YouTube, I'm not going to lie. So thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed it.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, before we go, do we have any last questions for Shannon?
Yes?
With the keyboard, you change perspective with numpads.
Yes.
Are there any shortcut for laptops?
For a laptop, that's a good question. For laptops, you would have to use the function key. Most laptops aren't long enough anymore to have a numpad. And this is getting a little bit deeper into it, you can do default views using the numpad. On a laptop with this one, you would hold down the function key and look for the blue numbers on there. You would press, I think it's J, K, L, respectively. They are on there, but not all of them use it. Okay, good question. Thanks again.
Thanks, Shannon, for a great demonstration. If you have any more questions about Blender or about taking what you've built in Blender and bringing it over to one of the 3D printers, I would encourage you to visit with any of our knowledgeable staff here in the Edmund Lowe Creative Studios or check out one of our logins for lynda.com. Like Shannon mentioned, there's thousands of videos on all kinds of tech topics. It's a really great resource we're glad we can offer here. Our next Tech Tuesday at 2 is going to be on November 1st, and we are going to be learning about Adobe Photoshop. And of course, as always at Tech Tuesday at 2, we will be giving away some great tech-related prizes. We want to say thank you to our friends at O State TV for helping us host today's live stream. At this point, we're going to say goodbye to our live video audience.